Hey guys, I'm going to talk about workbook page 153. Page 153 is a lot like page 152 that you did yesterday. So I just want you to, I want to remind you guys that if you're having trouble with something, make sure that you really go all the way through the video and do the examples on a piece of notebook paper with me while I'm doing them, or pause and go back if you need to. And practice a lot with the video and your workbook before you try to do it on your own, okay? Just like it's like in the classroom, just do it along with me, get some practice. Then if you have a specific question, take a picture of it or shoot me the question in a text, and I'll look at it and get some information back to you as soon as I can. But I want you to try to make sure that you take the time with the videos and look at it, and then I can help you with anything you need some assistance with, okay? So at the top of page 153, it says there are some percents that are easy to find mentally, such as 25%, 10%, 20%, 50%, 75%, and 100%, okay? The easiest one, other than 100%, is to find 50% of something. If you want to know that 50% of a number, that's the same thing as finding half of a number. So any number that says 50%, what is 50% of 20? 50% of 20 would be 10, because that's half. What would 50% of 30 be? 50% of 30 would be 15, because that's half. So that's a really easy one. 25%, you should automatically think, oh, that's the fraction 1/4. 10%, you know that 10 out of 100 is the same as 1/10. So that's the fraction for 10%. And all of these percent numbers are straight from the chart that you did on page 152, the chart that you had there to use. So refer to that chart still for page 153 if you're forgetting how to use those percentages, okay? So the difference on this page is that you actually have to round your percentages. They're not nice, easy numbers to already. You have to get them to something easier to work with to help you, okay? And rounding, there are rules for rounding, but for estimating, you can kind of do what works best for you. So if you need to change the percentage number, you can do that. If you need to change the actual whole number that you're finding a percent of, you can do that. Do whatever works better for you to make a relationship with those numbers that you can do mentally, okay? So we're going to look at number 1 together. Number 1 says 81% of 196. That seems pretty random, okay? And something that seems a little complicated that we wouldn't know right off the top of our head, okay? So 196, 81% of 196. Where do you start with that problem? Well, it says to estimate. So the first thing you probably are realizing that you need to do, let's not use this as 81%. We can use it instead as 80%. And go ahead and start thinking through this, guys. 80% is not too far off from 100%. So we're going to be talking about a pretty significant portion of 196. So now we're going to relate this and say, okay, let's find 80% of 196. So you have the percentage there. Here's the time to relate that percentage to a fraction. And all percentages are out of 100. So the first fraction we can think of here is 80 out of 100. Okay? So I'll write that down. And as soon as you see 80 out of 100, you should be thinking, what can I simplify 80 out of 100 to be? So it'll be a little bit easier to use. So how do you simplify 80 out of 100? It simplifies to be 8/10. So 8/10 of 196 is the same thing as multiplying. Anytime you have the word of here, you're going to change it to a multiplication symbol. So we're going to do 8/10 times 196. And what do we need to do to that 196 to make this a multiplication problem that we can do? All whole numbers are over 1. So 8/10 times 196 over 1. So here's where you can use a calculator again, okay? Or simplify these numbers out a little bit before you get started. Let's just go ahead and multiply straight across. I'm going to pull up my calculator and use it because I don't know 8 times 196 right off the top of my head. Use your calculator. There's nothing wrong with that. So 8 times 196 gives us a big number, 1,568. And then 10 times 1 on the bottom gives us 10. This might need to be one of the places where you stop and pause and think about the steps that we've gone through here, okay? We've estimated to 80%. We put that as a fraction and simplified it. And now we're multiplying, and this is something that we plugged into the calculator. So now you have 1,568 over 10. What do we do with that number? That's an improper fraction, and this fraction sign is the same thing as a division symbol, so you're actually going to divide by 10. Okay, if you remember, this we haven't talked about in a while, but if you're dividing by 10, it's just a matter of moving the decimal, or you can divide it on your phone or your calculator by 10 also. But you should realize here you can just move the decimal if you're dividing by 10 and make it 10 times smaller. So I'm just going to pretend there's a decimal after that 8 and move it over. And that would give us 156.8. So, when we're talking about a portion of 196, 80% of it, which is a big portion of it, gives us 156.8. And that's where we rounded to 80% there. And you can round this if you wanted to 160, whatever works better for you. You could even change the second number to be something that works better for you. So let's look at an example of that. So number 2 asks us 38% of 62. I'm going to grab a paper towel to wipe my board off very quickly because I didn't have one. So, number 2 says 38% of 62. Let's round those numbers to make them easier to use for us. If you want to use both of them and estimate both numbers, you can do that. Or you could just estimate one. But let's do the example here where we're going to estimate and round off those numbers to make them a little easier. Okay, so 38% of 62. What do you want to do to this problem to make it simpler when you estimate? What can we say instead of 38%? We could use 40%. And what could we use instead of 62? You could call that 60. So going back to number 1, if you wanted to change that 196 to 200 to use, that might make the problem a little easier, okay? So 40% of 60, okay? We need to change the percentage to a fraction so we can actually multiply it in this method. So 40% would be 40 out of 100, and we know that that would simplify to 4/10. 4/10 of 60 means 4/10 times 60, and put that over 1. And here where we've rounded both numbers, this is really going to make it a lot simpler. We can do mental math here. So 4 times 6 is 24, so 4 times 60 would be 240. And then 10 times 1 is 10, so the bottom would be 10. And 240 divided by 10 gives you 24. So that really becomes a lot simpler when you, if you want to estimate both numbers, and that's totally an option, okay? I'll do one more with you. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 asks us for 34% of 13. So go ahead and ask yourself, how can I make that a simpler problem? Okay, number 3, 34% of 13. So instead of 34%, you might be thinking, oh, I can use 30% instead of 34. And change the of to multiplication. And instead of 13, I could use 10. This becomes a lot easier. 30% of 10. You might already be seeing that in your head and know what it is. But let's walk through the steps. We're going to change this 30% to a fraction. 30 over 100, you know, simplifies to 3/10 times the whole number 10. And we put that whole number 10 over 1. Okay? So now it's just a matter of multiplying across. Let's go across the numerators and across the denominators. 3 times 10 is 30. 10 times 1 is 10. So now we're left with the fraction 30 over 10, or 30 divided by 10, and 30 divided by 10 equals 3. So 34% of 13 is about 3, okay? So just, you got to get your percentages, estimate them to something that works a little bit easier for you, and then change it to a fraction and multiply. If you need any assistance, let me know, but this page is a lot like the day before, okay? All right, guys, see you later.